The morning of June 15th, 2023, dawned bright and cloudless over the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood, Ohio. 3-year-old Maya Rodriguez sat cross-legged on her grandmother's freshly mowed front lawn, her dark curls bouncing as she giggled and clapped her tiny hands together. In front of her sat a pink plastic bubble machine, whirring cheerfully as it produced a steady stream of iridescent spheres that danced in the gentle morning breeze. "Look, abuela." Flying rainbows. Maya squealed in delight, her brown eyes sparkling, as she reached up to catch the bubbles with her small fingers. Each one popped with a soft whisper, sending droplets of soapy water across her yellow sundress. 72-year-old Carmen Rodriguez smiled from her front porch rocker, her weathered hands working steadily on the scarf she was knitting for Maya's upcoming birthday. "Si, Mia, muy bonita," she called out lovingly. Carmen had been watching Maya every Wednesday for the past year while her son, Carlos, and daughter-in-law Sofia worked their double shifts at the hospital. These peaceful mornings had become the highlight of her week. The Rodriguez family lived just 6 blocks away on Elm Street, but Carmen's house on Sycamore Avenue felt like a magical sanctuary to Maya. Here, there were no rules about staying. Inside, no worries about traffic, and always fresh cookies cooling on the kitchen windowsill. The neighborhood was a perfect slice of middle-class America white picket fences, manicured lawns, and the kind of tree-lined streets where children still rode bicycles without helmets, and neighbors knew each other's first names. Maya had been particularly excited this morning because Carmen had promised they would plant sunflowers in the backyard after lunch. The little girl had been chattering nonstop about how tall the flowers would grow and whether they would be taller than her daddy. She'd even drawn a picture the night before showing herself standing next to a giant yellow flower that reached up to fluffy white clouds. At exactly 10:47 a.m., the peaceful morning shattered like glass. The first sound was distant sirens, barely audible over Maya's laughter, and the gentle hum of the bubble machine. Carmen looked up from her knitting, a slight frown creasing her forehead. Sirens weren't unusual. The main highway ran just 2 miles north, but these seemed to be getting closer rather than fading away. 3 blocks away, Derek Thompson was running out of options. The 28-year-old had just robbed a convenience store at gunpoint, making off with $340 in cash and a carton of cigarettes. What should have been a simple getaway had turned into a nightmare when an off-duty police officer witnessed him fleeing the scene. Now 4 patrol cars were in hot pursuit as Thompson's stolen Honda Civic careened through the residential streets at nearly 60 miles per hour. Officer Jake Mitchell was in the lead pursuit vehicle, his 5-year-old German Shepherd partner Rex panting heavily in the specially designed rear compartment. At 34, Mitchell was a 12-year veteran of the Maplewood Police Department and one of their most experienced canine handlers. Rex, weighing in at 90 pounds of solid muscle and trained aggression, had been his partner for 3 years. Together, they had successfully apprehended dozens of suspects, earning commendations and the respect of their fellow officers. Maya was reaching for a particularly large bubble when the Honda Civic exploded onto Sycamore Avenue, tires screaming against the asphalt as Thompson took the corner at dangerous speed. The car fishtailed wildly before slamming into a fire hydrant. Just 50 yards from where Maya sat playing, water erupted skyward like a geyser, sending a rainbow spray across the street. Carmen Rodriguez shot to her feet, her knitting needles clattering to the porch floor. "Dios mío," she gasped, her hand flying to her heart as she watched Thompson stumble out of the wreckage, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Maya, startled by the tremendous crash, began to cry. She didn't understand what was happening, only that the loud noise had frightened her, and her beautiful bubbles had all disappeared. She scrambled to her feet, taking several steps toward her grandmother for comfort, when the first police car skidded around the corner. Officer Mitchell was out of his vehicle before it had completely stopped, his hand already on Rex's release mechanism. Years of training kicked in as he assessed the situation. Armed suspect, residential area, potential for civilian casualties. Standard protocol dictated deploying the K-9 unit to subdue the fleeing suspect quickly and efficiently. "Stop right there. Get on the ground," Mitchell shouted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. But Thompson, high on methamphetamine and desperate to avoid a third strike conviction, had no intention of surrendering. He looked around wildly, spotted an opening between two houses, and bolted toward what he hoped would be his escape route. That opening led directly through Carmen Rodriguez's front yard. "Rex attack! Take him down!" Mitchell commanded, releasing the powerful German Shepherd from the patrol car. Rex launched himself forward like a guided missile, his training overriding everything else as he focused on his target, the running suspect who needed to be stopped at any cost. But in the chaos of the moment, several critical factors converged into a perfect storm of tragedy. Thompson stumbled as he ran, changing his direction unexpectedly. Rex, committed to his attack trajectory, found his target had shifted. Maya, seeking comfort from her grandmother, had wandered several steps closer to the action, putting her directly in the dog's path. The collision happened in slow motion for everyone watching. Rex, unable to adjust his course, slammed into Maya with the force of a linebacker. The tiny girl, weighing barely 30 pounds, was knocked backward onto the concrete sidewalk. Before she could even scream, Rex's powerful jaws clamped down on her right arm, just above the elbow. Maya's shriek of pain and terror pierced the morning air like a knife through silk. Carmen Rodriguez collapsed on her porch, her legs giving out as she watched her beloved granddaughter being mauled by the massive police dog. Blood began to pool beneath Maya's small body as Rex's teeth punctured through skin, muscle, and came dangerously close to the bone. Officer Mitchell realized his catastrophic error within seconds, but those seconds felt like hours. "Rex, release! Release!" he screamed, running toward the dog and child. But Rex, in the grip of his attack training, held on for several more agonizing moments before finally responding to his handler's frantic commands. When Rex finally let go and backed away, Maya lay motionless on the blood-stained sidewalk, her yellow sundress now crimson with her own blood. Her right arm hung at an unnatural angle, and her face was pale as porcelain. The bubble machine continued its cheerful whirring nearby, now seeming obscenely inappropriate against the backdrop of tragedy. Neighbors poured out of their houses, some screaming, others calling 911 on their cell phones. Mrs. Patterson from next door ran over with clean towels, pressing them against Maya's wounds, while Carmen Rodriguez knelt beside her granddaughter, sobbing and praying in rapid Spanish. Derek Thompson, forgotten in the chaos, had disappeared into the maze of backyards and alleyways. The robbery suspect who had started this chain of events was never caught. As the ambulance sirens grew louder, Officer Mitchell knelt beside the broken little girl, his hands shaking as he tried to comprehend what had just happened. Rex sat nearby, whimpering softly, somehow sensing that this was different from all their previous deployments. Maya's eyes fluttered open once before the paramedics arrived. Through her pain and confusion, she looked up at the strange man in the police uniform kneeling beside her and whispered a single word that would haunt Jake Mitchell for years to come. Why? The perfect morning was over. The perfect life of a 3-year-old girl and her family was forever changed. And somewhere in the distance, Derek Thompson was still running, leaving behind a trail of destruction that would echo through courtrooms, communities, and consciences for years to come. The pediatric intensive care unit at Maplewood General Hospital had never felt smaller than it did to Carlos and Sofia Rodriguez as they maintained their desperate vigil beside their daughter's hospital bed. For 72 hours, Maya had remained unconscious, her tiny body connected to a maze of tubes and monitors that beeped with mechanical precision. Her right arm was wrapped in layers of pristine white bandages that couldn't hide the massive surgical reconstruction that had taken place beneath. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the lead pediatric trauma surgeon, had worked for 6 grueling hours to repair the extensive damage. Rex's powerful jaws had crushed Maya's humerus bone, severed 2 major muscle groups, and come dangerously close to the brachial artery. Another millimeter, and she could have bled to death on that sidewalk, Dr. Hernandez had told the Rodriguez family with clinical honesty that cut through their hearts like surgical steel. Sophia hadn't left Maya's bedside since the ambulance had rushed through the emergency room doors. She sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, holding her daughter's small left hand and whispering Spanish lullabies that had once soothed Maya to sleep. Carlos paced the narrow room like a caged animal, his maintenance worker's uniform still stained with the grease from the morning shift he'd abandoned when the hospital called. "She asked for her stuffed puppy yesterday," Sophia whispered to the social worker who had stopped by to check on the family. Her voice was hoarse from crying and lack of sleep. Before the attack, Maya loved dogs. She would run up to every dog in the park, wanting to pet them all. Now she doesn't understand why a dog hurt her so badly. The medical bills were already staggering. The initial emergency surgery had cost $47,000. The specialized orthopedic reconstruction added another $32,000. The plastic surgery to minimize scarring would require at least 3 more procedures at $15,000 each. Physical therapy was projected to last 18 months at $200 per session, 3 times weekly. The total was approaching $200,000, and Maya hadn't even regained consciousness yet. Carlos made $28,000 a year as a hospital maintenance worker. Sophia earned $22,000 as a part-time dental hygienist. Their insurance, like many working-class policies, had a maximum coverage limit that would be exhausted within the first month of Maya's treatment. They were facing financial ruin at the exact moment their daughter needed them most. Attorney Sarah Chun first learned about Maya's case when her daughter called from Maplewood Elementary School. "Mom, something terrible happened to Maya Rodriguez. She's in Isabella's class. A police dog attacked her for no reason." 8-year-old Emma Chun had come home in tears, unable to understand how such a thing could happen to someone she knew. Chun had built her reputation over 15 years as a civil rights attorney who specialized in police misconduct cases. Her office walls were lined with photographs of clients who had found justice against impossible odds, victims of excessive force, wrongful arrests, and civil rights violations. But she had never handled a case involving a 3-year-old child and a police K-9 unit. The initial consultation took place in Maya's hospital room because she still couldn't be moved. Chun sat beside the sleeping child, listening as Carlos and Sophia described the attack in broken English punctuated by tears. "She was just playing with bubbles," Sophia kept repeating. "Just playing with bubbles in her grandmother's yard." Chun reviewed the police report, the medical records, and the neighbor's security camera footage that had captured every horrific second of the attack. The video was devastating. It clearly showed Maya posing no threat to anyone, Rex breaking away from his intended target, and the vicious attack that followed. "This isn't just medical malpractice," Chun told the Rodriguez family. "This is a fundamental failure of police training and protocol that put an innocent child in mortal danger." Within hours of Chun filing the lawsuit, the battle lines were drawn with military precision. Police Chief Robert Hayes, a 25-year veteran with political aspirations, called an immediate press conference from the steps of City Hall. Standing flanked by Officer Mitchell and Rex, Hayes delivered a defiant message that would echo through the community for months to come. "Let me be crystal clear about something," Hayes declared to the assembled media, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being believed without question. "Our officers responded to a dangerous armed robbery in progress. A violent criminal was fleeing through a residential neighborhood, putting every family at risk. Officer Mitchell and Rex acted heroically to protect this community. What happened to the Rodriguez child was a tragic accident. But we will not allow Monday morning quarterbacks to second-guess split-second decisions made in life-or-death situations." The press conference was broadcast live on 3 local television stations and shared thousands of times on social media within hours. Hayes had successfully reframed the narrative from police dog attacks innocent child to hero officers unfairly blamed for accident during dangerous pursuit. The community response was swift and divisive. The Fraternal Order of Police organized a rally supporting Officer Mitchell and Rex, drawing over 300 supporters to the courthouse square. Signs reading, "Back the Blue" and "Heroes Don't Deserve." This dominated the crowd. Police officers from neighboring departments attended in uniform, creating a powerful visual statement of solidarity. Counter-protests began the next day. Maya's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Patricia Vance, organized a candlelight vigil that drew over 500 community members. Parents brought their own young children, many carrying signs with Maya's kindergarten photo and messages like, "Protect our children," and "Justice for Maya." The contrast between the 2 demonstrations was stark blue uniforms versus families with strollers, police sirens versus children's voices singing "Amazing Grace." The Rodriguez family became unwilling symbols in a battle they never wanted to fight. Death threats began arriving in their mailbox within days of the lawsuit being filed. Someone spray-painted "Police Haters" across their front door. Sophia had to take indefinite leave from her job when protesters began gathering outside the dental office where she worked. But support also poured in from unexpected sources. An anonymous donor paid for Carmen Rodriguez's medical bills after she suffered a mild heart attack from the stress of watching Maya's attack. The local children's hospital established a fund to help with Maya's ongoing medical expenses. Toys and cards arrived daily from strangers across the country who had seen Maya's story on the news. Officer Jake Mitchell found himself at the center of a storm he couldn't control. A 12-year veteran with commendations for bravery and an exemplary record, he had never faced anything like the scrutiny that now followed his every move. His wife received threatening phone calls at work. His 2 teenage children were harassed at school by classmates who had seen the news coverage. Meanwhile, Maya began showing the first signs of waking up. Her fingers would twitch when Sophia sang to her. Her eyelids would flutter when Carlos read her favorite bedtime stories aloud. Dr. Hernandez cautioned that the child would face months of rehabilitation, both physical and psychological, but the signs were encouraging. Chun worked 18-hour days building the case that would define her career. She hired expert witnesses, investigated Rex's training records, and interviewed dozens of witnesses. What she discovered would shock even her experienced legal team. This attack wasn't an isolated incident, but the predictable result of systemic failures that had been ignored for years. The stakes couldn't have been higher. For the Rodriguez family, this lawsuit represented their only hope of paying for Maya's treatment and ensuring she would have the resources she needed for a full recovery. For the police department, it threatened to expose failures that could cost careers and millions in taxpayer dollars. As Maya's eyes finally opened for the first time since the attack, blinking slowly in the harsh hospital lighting, she had no idea that her recovery would become the centerpiece of a legal battle that would divide her community and ultimately change how police departments across America trained their canine units. The fight for justice was just beginning. Investigative reporter Amanda Walsh had built her career on uncovering stories that others wanted to stay buried. At 36, she had already won 2 regional journalism awards for exposing corruption in city government and unsafe conditions. At the county jail, when the Maya Rodriguez story broke, something about Police Chief Hayes' press conference had struck her as too polished, too prepared, as if he had been expecting this exact scenario. Walsh spent her evenings in the basement archives of the Maplewood Police Department, meticulously combing through public records requests that most reporters wouldn't have the patience to pursue. What she discovered in Rex's training files made her hands shake as she photographed each page with her phone. Rex had failed his initial bite control assessment in March 2021, scoring only 67 out of 100 on the critical test that measured a canine's ability to release on command. The passing score was 75. The report, signed by trainer Lieutenant Mark Stevens, recommended additional conditioning before Rex could be certified for active duty. But someone had overruled that recommendation with a handwritten note: "Deploy immediately. We need the unit operational." The signature was barely legible, but Walsh's trained eye could make out the initials: R.H. Robert Hayes. More damaging still were the internal incident reports that had been filed and apparently forgotten. In September 2021, Rex had attacked a postal worker who was delivering packages to the police station. The incident report, buried in administrative files, described how Rex had exhibited unprovoked aggression toward civilian David Kim, requiring medical attention for bite wounds to his left thigh. The report recommended immediate retraining, but no action was taken. 3 months later, Rex had bitten 17-year-old Marcus Thompson during a routine traffic stop. Thompson, who was black, had been reaching for his wallet when Rex lunged forward and clamped down on his forearm. The incident report described Thompson as non-compliant and threatening, but Walsh discovered that the teenager's parents had filed a formal complaint alleging excessive force and racial bias. That complaint had mysteriously disappeared from official files, though Walsh found a copy in Thompson's medical records at the emergency room. The pattern was undeniable. Rex was a dangerous animal whose aggression had been documented repeatedly, yet he remained on active duty because the department needed K-9 units to maintain their federal funding and public image. Meanwhile, Maya's recovery was proving more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a child psychologist specializing in trauma, had been working with Maya for 3 weeks since she regained consciousness. The sessions took place in a cheerfully decorated room at the Children's Hospital, filled with toys and games designed to help young minds process experiences too terrible for words. "Maya doesn't sleep through the night anymore," Sophia confided to Dr. Martinez during one of their weekly consultations. "She wakes up screaming about a scary doggy with big teeth. Yesterday, she saw a golden retriever at the grocery store and had a complete panic attack. She was hyperventilating so badly that I thought she was going to faint." The psychological trauma was manifesting in ways that broke Sophia's heart daily. Maya, who had once been an adventurous child, eager to explore every corner of her grandmother's backyard, now refused to go outside unless both parents accompanied her. She wouldn't even look at her collection of stuffed animals, all of which had been moved to the closet after she screamed on seeing her beloved toy poodle. Dr. Martinez used play therapy techniques to help Maya express her feelings through drawings and dolls. The pictures Maya created were disturbing in their childish clarity dark, frightening shapes with large teeth chasing small stick figures. "It's normal for children to process trauma through art," Dr. Martinez explained to the Rodriguez family. "But Maya's drawings show a level of terror that suggests she's reliving the attack multiple times each day." The physical recovery was equally challenging. Maya's right arm remained in a complex brace that limited her movement and caused constant discomfort. Physical therapy sessions 3 times a week were torture for a 3-year-old who didn't understand. Why adults kept asking her to move her arm in ways that caused pain. She used to draw pictures for hours, Carlos told the physical therapist during one particularly difficult session. Now she can't even hold a crayon properly. She gets frustrated and starts crying when she tries to color. Back at the police station, Officer Jake Mitchell was struggling with his own demons. The 12-year veteran had always taken pride in his partnership with Rex, but now he couldn't look at his canine partner without seeing Maya's blood on the sidewalk. His sleep was haunted by the child's terrified scream and her whispered question, "Why?" Mitchell's wife, Janet, had noticed the changes immediately. "Jake barely eats anymore," she confided to her sister during a tearful phone conversation. "He sits in his patrol car for hours after his shift ends, just staring at nothing. Last night, I found him in the garage at 2 a.m., cleaning his equipment over and over again." The pressure from within the department was immense. Fellow officers treated Mitchell with a mixture of support and suspicion. Some viewed him as an unfortunate victim of circumstances beyond his control. Others whispered that he should have maintained better control of Rex during the pursuit. Sergeant Patricia Vance, a 20-year veteran and one of the few female officers in the department, watched the situation unfold with growing unease. Vance had worked with K-9 units throughout her career and had always harbored private concerns about Rex's temperament. She had witnessed his unprovoked aggression during training exercises and had mentioned her concerns to supervisors on multiple occasions, only to be told that Rex was just enthusiastic. "I should have pushed harder," Vance told her husband one evening as they watched news coverage of Maya's case. "I knew that dog was dangerous. I could see it in his eyes during training." But nobody wanted to hear it, because Rex had good statistics, lots of successful apprehensions, good public relations value. The department loved having a big, intimidating German Shepherd for school visits and community events. The breaking point came when Vance discovered that her own incident report about Rex's concerning behavior during a training exercise had been removed from his file. The report, filed 8 months before Maya's attack, had detailed how Rex had refused to release a training dummy despite repeated commands, continuing to shake and tear at the target for nearly 30 seconds after being ordered to stop. They, arrogant, Vance realized with growing horror. They knew Rex was a liability, and they covered it up because they didn't want to lose their K-9 program funding. Amanda Walsh's investigation was approaching a breakthrough when she received an anonymous phone call at her office. The voice was female, nervous, and clearly disguising its natural tone. "Meet me at the Riverside Diner tomorrow at 7 p.m. Come alone. I have information about the Rodriguez case that will change everything." Walsh arrived at the diner early, choosing a booth in the back corner with clear sightlines to all entrances. At exactly 7 p.m., a woman in a dark coat and baseball cap slid into the opposite seat. It took Walsh a moment to recognize Sergeant Patricia Vance without her uniform. "This conversation never happened," Vance said quietly, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "But that little girl deserves justice, and I can't sleep at night knowing what I know." The envelope contained copies of the buried incident reports, Rex's failed training assessments, and internal emails discussing the decision to keep the dangerous dog on active duty, despite mounting evidence of his instability. Most damaging of all was an email from Police Chief Hayes to the K-9 unit supervisor. "Rex stays operational regardless of training concerns. We cannot afford to be down a K-9 unit during budget review season." This dog was a ticking time bomb, Vance said, her voice heavy with guilt and anger. Everyone in the department knew it, but nobody had the courage to speak up, because Hayes made it clear that questioning the K-9 program was career suicide. Walsh studied the documents by the dim light of the diner booth, her journalist's instincts recognizing the explosive potential of what she held. These weren't just administrative oversights. They were evidence of a deliberate cover-up that had put public safety at risk for political and financial reasons. "Why now?" Walsh asked. "Why are you coming forward?" Vance was quiet for a long moment, staring at her untouched coffee. "Because I have a 3-year-old granddaughter," she finally said. "And every time I look at her, I see Maya Rodriguez lying on that sidewalk, bleeding and crying for her grandmother. I became a police officer to protect people, not to be part of a system that sacrifices children for bureaucratic convenience." As Vance left the diner, disappearing into the darkness of the parking lot, Walsh knew she was holding the key to tell a story that would rock the Maplewood Police Department to its foundation. The question now was whether she could publish it before the department found ways to discredit or silence her sources. Maya Rodriguez's fight for justice was about to become much more than a civil lawsuit. It was about to expose a culture of corruption and cover-ups that had been festering in the shadows for years, protected by badges and blue uniforms that were supposed to represent integrity in public service. Judge Patricia Hawkins had presided over countless high-profile cases during her 18 years on the bench, but nothing had prepared her for the media circus surrounding Rodriguez v. City of Maplewood. At 6 a.m. on the morning of opening arguments, satellite trucks from CNN, Fox News, and NBC were already positioned outside the courthouse like an army preparing for battle. Security barriers held back crowds of protesters, carrying signs ranging from "Justice for Maya" to "Support our police heroes." Inside courtroom 3A, Hawkins surveyed the packed gallery with the sharp eyes of someone accustomed to maintaining order. In chaos, every seat was filled with a carefully orchestrated mix of supporters, media representatives, and legal observers from civil rights organizations across the state. The tension was palpable. Families with young children sat rigidly beside uniformed police officers, creating an atmosphere so charged that even veteran court officers seemed nervous. Amanda Walsh's explosive expose had been published 3 days earlier, sending shockwaves through the legal proceedings and beyond. Killer Dog, the cover-up that nearly destroyed a child, had run as a front-page story in the Maplewood Tribune and been picked up by national news outlets within hours. The revelation of Rex's buried failure records and previous attacks had transformed public perception overnight, shifting sympathy decisively toward the Rodriguez family. Attorney Sarah Chun sat at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by boxes of evidence that told the story of institutional negligence spanning 3 years. Beside her, Carlos and Sofia Rodriguez held hands tightly, both wearing their best church clothes and expressions of determined hope mixed with barely controlled anxiety. Maya was not in the courtroom. Dr. Martinez had advised against exposing her to the intense environment until absolutely necessary. At the defendant's table, the city had assembled a legal team that looked like it belonged in a corporate boardroom rather than a small-town courthouse. Lead defense attorney Marcus Webb, flown in from a prestigious Chicago firm at considerable taxpayer expense, projected confidence with every gesture. His reputation for destroying opposing witnesses was legendary, and he had never lost a police misconduct case. Police Chief Robert Hayes sat in the front row behind the defense table, his uniform perfectly pressed and his expression unreadable. But those who knew him well could see the stress lines around his eyes and the way his jaw muscles tightened when Amanda Walsh's name was mentioned. The woman who had exposed his cover-up sat just 20 feet away in the media section, her laptop open and fingers poised to document every moment of his potential downfall. "A plaintiff will present opening arguments," Judge Hawkins announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom. Chun rose slowly, taking a moment to make eye contact with several jurors before beginning. The 12-person jury was a cross-section of Middle America 3 retirees, 2 teachers, a nurse, an accountant, a factory worker, a stay-at-home mother, a bank manager, a construction supervisor, and a small business owner. Chun had spent weeks studying their backgrounds, knowing that this case would ultimately be decided by their ability to empathize with a 3-year-old victim while still respecting law enforcement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Chun began, her voice steady but filled with controlled emotion. 3 months ago, Maya Rodriguez was a normal 3-year-old girl who loved bubbles, puppies, and her grandmother's cookies. Today, she wakes up screaming from nightmares and refuses to go outside without both parents by her side. The question before you is simple. Who is responsible for transforming an innocent child's life into a living nightmare? Chun walked slowly toward the jury box, her eyes connecting with each juror individually. The defense will tell you this was an unavoidable accident during a dangerous police pursuit. They will paint Officer Mitchell and his canine partner Rex as heroes doing their best in an impossible situation. But the evidence will show you something very different, a pattern of negligence, cover-ups, and institutional failures that made Maya's attack not just predictable, but inevitable. She turned toward a large easel holding a poster-sized photograph of Maya before the attack, a smiling 3-year-old with bright eyes and chocolate ice cream on her chin. This is Maya Rodriguez, as she should be remembered. Happy, curious, unafraid. The evidence will show that the Maplewood Police Department robbed Maya of that innocence not through one tragic mistake, but through years of deliberate decisions that prioritized public image over public safety. Chun spent the next 45 minutes methodically laying out her case. She described Rex's failed training assessments, the 3 previous attacks that had been covered up, and the internal emails proving departmental knowledge of the dog's dangerous tendencies. She showed the jury security footage of Maya playing peacefully with Bubbles, then froze the image just before Rex appeared in the frame. Rex weighed 90 pounds of trained killing power, Chun said, her voice growing harder. Maya weighed 28 pounds and was playing with soap bubbles. The force of Rex's bite measured 238 pounds of pressure per square inch, enough to crush the delicate bones of a child's arm like twigs. The medical evidence will show that Maya's injuries were not the result of a brief defensive bite, but a sustained attack that lasted nearly 15 seconds while trained officers watched. When Chun finished, the courtroom was silent, except for the soft sounds of Sofia Rodriguez crying quietly into a tissue. Marcus Webb's opening argument was a masterclass in legal theater. He stood before the jury like a professor addressing a classroom, his expensive suit and confident bearing commanding immediate attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, what happened to Maya Rodriguez was indeed tragic. No one, not the police department, not Officer Mitchell, and certainly not Maya's family, wanted this outcome. But tragedy does not automatically equal liability." Webb began constructing his defense with surgical precision. Officer Mitchell and Rex were pursuing Derek Thompson, an armed robber who had just terrorized a convenience store clerk at gunpoint. Thompson was fleeing through a residential neighborhood at high speed, putting every family on Sycamore Avenue at risk. When Thompson crashed his stolen vehicle and fled on foot directly toward where Maya was playing, Officer Mitchell had seconds, literally seconds, to make a decision that would protect both the child and the community. The defense attorney moved to a timeline chart that had been prepared with Hollywood production values. The entire incident, from the time Thompson's car crashed until Maya was injured, lasted exactly 37 seconds. In that 37 seconds, Officer Mitchell had to assess the threat, deploy his canine partner, and attempt to apprehend a dangerous suspect who was running directly toward an innocent child. Webb's voice rose with righteous indignation. "The plaintiff's attorney wants you to believe that Officer Mitchell should have somehow predicted the exact trajectory of a fleeing suspect while simultaneously controlling every movement of a trained police dog in the heat of a life-threatening pursuit. That's not reasonable, It's impossible. He turned toward the packed gallery, where dozens of police officers sat in uniform as a show of support. Rex has served this community faithfully for 3 years. He has apprehended dozens of dangerous criminals without incident. He has performed demonstrations at elementary schools, bringing joy to thousands of children. He has been a model police dog in every measurable way. The defense's strategy became clear as Webb continued. Admit the tragedy while deflecting responsibility to circumstances beyond anyone's control. This case isn't about Rex being a killer dog, as sensationalist media reports have suggested. It's about the split-second realities of police work in a dangerous world. Officer Mitchell and Rex were protecting Maya Rodriguez and every other child in that neighborhood from an armed criminal who had already shown his willingness to use violence. Webb concluded his opening by addressing the elephant in the room, Amanda Walsh's expose. You will hear about previous incidents involving Rex, taken out of context and sensationalized for dramatic effect. You will hear about so-called cover-ups that are actually routine administrative decisions made by professionals with decades of experience. Don't let media sensationalism cloud your judgment of what really happened on June 15th. Judge Hawkins called for a brief recess, and the courtroom erupted into whispered conversations. Legal analysts in the media section frantically typed updates on their laptops. Police officers and Maya's supporters eyed each other warily as they filed into the hallway. Dr. James Peterson, the prosecution's expert witness on canine behavior, waited nervously in the witness preparation room. His testimony would be crucial. He would explain to the jury exactly how Rex's attack violated every principle of proper police dog training and deployment. Peterson had reviewed hundreds of hours of training footage and Rex's complete behavioral record, and what he had discovered would devastate the defense's claims about the dog's exemplary service record. As the afternoon session began, Chung called her first witness, Carmen Rodriguez, Maya's grandmother who had witnessed the entire attack from her front porch. The 72-year-old woman walked slowly to the witness stand, her hands shaking. As she was sworn in, her testimony would provide the emotional foundation for everything that followed, the voice of an innocent bystander whose world had been shattered by institutional negligence. The battle for Maya Rodriguez's future was entering its most critical phase, with both sides preparing to unleash evidence and testimony that would determine whether a 3-year-old's suffering would result in justice or be dismissed as an unfortunate accident in an imperfect world. The breakthrough moment came during Dr. James Peterson's devastating testimony on the trial's third day. The renowned canine behavior expert had spent 4 hours methodically dismantling every aspect of Rex's training record, using video evidence and behavioral analysis that left the defense team visibly shaken. But it was his final statement that sent shockwaves through the courtroom and changed the entire trajectory of the case. In my 30 years of studying police dog behavior, Dr. Peterson testified, looking directly at the jury, Rex exhibits classic signs of predatory drift, a dangerous condition, where a dog's natural hunting instincts override its training. Based on my analysis of the attack footage and Rex's behavioral history, I can state with professional certainty that this dog should never have been certified for police work. The gallery erupted in gasps and murmurs. Judge Hawkins gavelled for order, but the damage was done. Peterson's expert opinion had just classified Rex not as a trained police officer, but as a dangerous predator wearing a badge. Defense attorney Marcus Webb knew his case was hemorrhaging credibility. During the evening recess, he huddled with his legal team in a conference room that reeked of desperation and cold coffee. We need to change the narrative, Webb declared, pacing like a caged animal. The jury is starting to see Rex as a monster. We need to humanize this situation, make it about identification, not behavior. Webb's solution was as brilliant as it was ruthless. The next morning, he filed a motion that stunned both the prosecution and seasoned legal observers. Your Honor, Webb announced in open court, the defense respectfully requests that the plaintiff positively identify the dog in question. Maya Rodriguez must confirm that Rex is indeed the animal that allegedly attacked her. Without positive identification, this entire case is built on assumption and speculation. Attorney Sarah Chun shot to her feet, her face flushed with indignation. Your Honor, this is unconscionable. The defendant is asking us to traumatize a 3-year-old child who has already suffered unimaginable trauma. Maya Rodriguez was knocked unconscious during the attack. Her identification would be based on terror, not clear memory. But Webb was prepared for this objection. Your Honor, positive identification is a fundamental requirement in any case involving alleged assault. The plaintiff cannot claim damages from a specific dog without first proving that this specific dog was responsible. The defense has the right to challenge identification, regardless of the plaintiff's age. Judge Patricia Hawkins found herself facing the most difficult decision of her judicial career. She had handled hundreds of cases involving children, but never one where a child victim's testimony was so central to establishing basic facts. The legal precedent was clear: defendants had the right to challenge identification. But the human cost of forcing a traumatized 3-year-old to confront her attacker seemed unconscionable. I need to see counsel in chambers, Judge Hawkins announced, her voice betraying the weight of the decision, before her dot in the private conference room behind her courtroom. Hawkins struggled with competing legal and moral obligations. Mr. Webb, your motion is technically correct under the law, but we're talking about a child who wakes up screaming every night because of what your client's dog did to her. Webb remained unmoved. Your Honor, my client faces potential financial ruin and the destruction of his career based on allegations that haven't been properly substantiated. Due process requires that the plaintiff identify the alleged perpetrator. Chun fought back desperately. Judge Dr. Martinez has been working with Maya for months just to help her function normally. Forcing her to face Rex could undo all of that progress. We have security camera footage, DNA evidence from the bite wounds, and witness testimony. Identification is not in question. But it is in question, Webb countered smoothly. The footage shows a German Shepherd attacking the plaintiff. But the Maplewood Police Department has 3 German Shepherds in their K-9 unit. Without positive identification, how can we be certain Rex was the specific dog involved? Judge Hawkins knew Webb was grasping at straws. The evidence clearly established Rex as the attacker. But the law was the law, and defendants' rights couldn't be sacrificed for emotional considerations, no matter how compelling. I'm going to allow the identification, Hawkins ruled finally, her voice heavy with reluctance. But I'm ordering special accommodations. The courtroom will be cleared of all spectators except essential personnel. The child may have a support person with her. And if at any point one determine that this procedure is causing excessive trauma, I will halt it immediately. Chun returned to the courtroom, feeling like she had been punched in the stomach. She had to deliver news to the Rodriguez family that would shatter their world all over again. Maya has to see Rex? Sofia Rodriguez whispered, her face draining of color as Chun explained the judge's ruling. She has to look at the dog that almost killed her? Carlos Rodriguez stood abruptly, his hands clenched into fists. This is insane. They're using our daughter as a weapon in their legal games. She's 3 years old. She doesn't even understand what a courtroom is. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, who had been working with Maya throughout the trial preparation, felt her heart breaking for the family. Maya has made incredible progress in our therapy sessions, she explained gently, but asking her to face Rex ... It could trigger a severe psychological setback that might take years to overcome. The decision ultimately fell to Maya's parents. They could refuse to allow their daughter to testify, but doing so would likely result in losing the case and foregoing any chance of compensation for Maya's medical bills and future care. The city's insurance company had made it clear they would not settle without a definitive court victory. "What does Maya say about it?" Chan asked during a family meeting that felt more like a funeral planning session that Dr. Martinez had been preparing. Maya for the possibility of testifying through play therapy sessions using dolls and stuffed animals. Maya understands that there's a big dog that hurt her, and that some people want her to tell them about it. When I asked her if she would be scared to see the dog again, she said something that broke my heart. The room fell silent, waiting. She said, "If I tell them, will the scary doggy not hurt other little girls?" Sofia Rodriguez began crying quietly. Even at 3 years old, Maya was more concerned about protecting other children than her own fear. The preparation for Maya's testimony became the most intensive psychological intervention Dr. Martinez had ever attempted. Over the course of 2 weeks, she worked with Maya using graduated exposure therapy, first with toy dogs, then photographs of German shepherds, and finally video footage of Rex taken during training exercises. "Maya is remarkably resilient," Dr. Martinez reported to the legal team. "But I need everyone to understand that this child is going to be reliving the worst moment of her life in a room full of strangers. If she breaks down, if she becomes hysterical, we need to be prepared to stop immediately." The Rodriguez family received an outpouring of support from the community as news of Maya's upcoming testimony spread. The local church organized prayer vigils. Maya's kindergarten classmates made her a card signed by all 23 children in her class. Strangers sent stuffed animals and flowers to the courthouse, but they also received renewed threats from Rex's supporters. Someone spray-painted child exploiters on their car. Anonymous callers accused them of using their daughter for money. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Officer Jake Mitchell, meanwhile, was struggling with his own conscience. He had watched Dr. Peterson's testimony with growing horror, realizing that his partner Rex was indeed the dangerous animal the expert had described. Mitchell's wife found him in their garage at 3 a.m. the night before Maya's scheduled testimony, sitting in his patrol car and staring at nothing. "I should resign," Mitchell told her, his voice hollow. "I should just resign and disappear. That little girl is going to have to look at the dog that ruined her life because of my failures as a handler." The night before Maya's testimony, Chun couldn't sleep. She walked through her closing arguments obsessively, knowing that everything depended on how a 3-year-old child would react to facing her attacker. The case had evolved far beyond a simple civil lawsuit. It had become a test of whether the justice system could protect the most vulnerable while still maintaining due process for the accused. As dawn broke over the courthouse, crowds began gathering again. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Even Rex's staunchest supporters seemed subdued by the prospect of a traumatized child being forced to confront the source of her nightmares. Some police officers who had attended every day of the trial were notably absent. Inside the courthouse, Maya Rodriguez was getting dressed in her favorite purple dress with white flowers, the same style she had worn to her grandmother's house for bubbles and cookies before her world changed forever. She clutched her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, and asked her mother the same question she had asked every day for weeks. "Will the scary doggy be nice to me today, Mama?" Sofia Rodriguez kissed her daughter's forehead, fighting back tears. "We'll be right there with you, mi amor. You're the bravest little girl in the whole world." As Maya walked through the courthouse doors, holding her parents' hands and carrying the hopes of everyone who believed in justice, she had no idea that her next words would change everything, not just for her family, but for police departments across the nation. The courthouse clock struck 2:17 p.m. when bailiff Thomas Murphy opened the heavy oak doors to allow Rex into courtroom 3A. The atmosphere was so charged with tension that even the air conditioning seemed to hum with nervous energy. Judge Patricia Hawkins had cleared the gallery of all but essential personnel. Only the legal teams, court officers, Maya's parents, Dr. Martinez, and a handful of media representatives remained in the cavernous space that suddenly felt impossibly small. Maya sat in the witness box, her tiny legs dangling several inches above the floor, clutching Mr. Hoppy so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. She wore her favorite purple dress with white flowers, the same outfit she had chosen for brave days. Throughout her therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, her right arm remained in a modified brace that allowed for basic movement, but still bore the visible scars of Rex's attack, pink and raised against her olive skin. Officer Jake Mitchell entered first, his face ashen and his movements mechanical. Behind him, Canine Handler Sergeant David Morrison held Rex's leash with both hands, a heavy-duty restraint designed for controlling 90 pounds of trained muscle and potential aggression. Rex moved with the fluid power of a predator, his black and tan coat gleaming under the fluorescent courtroom lights, his dark eyes scanning the unfamiliar environment with alertness that bordered on agitation. The moment Rex appeared in Maya's line of sight, every adult in the courtroom held their breath. Dr. Martinez positioned herself at the edge of the witness box, ready to intervene if Maya showed signs of severe distress. Sofia Rodriguez gripped her husband's hand so tightly that her wedding ring cut into his fingers. Carlos stared at the dog that had nearly killed his daughter, his jaw muscles working overtime to contain emotions that threatened to explode. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 hours, Maya remained completely motionless. Her large brown eyes, which had once sparkled with childish delight at bubble machines and ice cream cones, now held a gravity that no 3-year-old should ever possess. She studied Rex with the intense focus of someone trying to reconcile a nightmare with reality, her breathing shallow and controlled in the way Dr. Martinez had taught her during their trauma therapy sessions. Rex, for his part, seemed to sense something different about this encounter. The powerful German shepherd's usual confident bearing shifted subtly as he caught Maya's scent and locked eyes with the small child. His ears, typically erect and forward, flickered uncertainly. A barely audible whine escaped his throat, not aggressive or threatening, but something that sounded almost like recognition or confusion. "Maya," Sarachon said gently, her voice barely above a whisper in the hushed courtroom. "Can you tell us if you've seen this dog before?" Maya's response was not what anyone expected. Instead of the terrified screaming or catatonic freeze that Dr. Martinez had prepared for, Maya slowly stood up in the witness box. Her stuffed rabbit fell to the floor as she gripped the wooden rail. With both hands, her scarred right arm trembling slightly from the effort. "You're bigger than I remembered," Maya said, her clear 3-year-old voice carrying remarkably well in the silent courtroom. The statement was so unexpected and delivered with such matter-of-fact observation that several adults visibly startled. Defense attorney Marcus Webb leaned forward, sensing an opportunity. "Maya, are you sure this is the same dog that—" "Yes." Maya interrupted with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "That's him. That's the scary doggy that hurt my arm." She lifted her right arm slightly, showing the brace and visible scars. "But he looks different here. He looks ... smaller somehow." Dr. Martinez later explained that this observation revealed Maya's psychological healing process. The source of her nightmares was literally shrinking as she faced it in reality rather than in her trauma-distorted memories. Officer Mitchell watched from the defendant's table, tears streaming down his face as he witnessed the child he had failed to protect, displaying courage that he had never possessed. Rex seemed to sense his handler's distress and turned toward Mitchell with a questioning whine, as if seeking guidance for a situation his training had never prepared him for. Then Maya did something that stopped every heart in the courtroom. She began walking slowly toward the witness box's opening, clearly intending to get closer to Rex. Dr. Martinez moved to intercept her, but Maya held up her small hand in a surprisingly authoritative gesture. "It's okay, Dr. Becky," Maya said, using her special name for Dr. Martinez. "I need to see him up close. I need to know something." Judge Hawkins faced another split-second decision. Every instinct told her to stop this unprecedented interaction between victim and attacker, but Maya's demeanor suggested something profound was happening, something that went beyond legal procedure or psychological protocol. "Everyone stay calm," Hawkins ordered quietly, nodding to the court officers who had tensed for intervention. "Let's see what happens." Maya walked with deliberate steps toward where Rex stood with Sergeant Morrison, the German shepherd's body. Language shifted as she approached his tail, which had been held high and alert, lowered slightly. His ears, previously scanning for threats, focused entirely on the small girl moving toward him with purpose that seemed to transcend her age. When Maya stopped approximately 3 feet from Rex, close enough to see the powerful muscles beneath his coat, close enough to observe the intelligence in his dark eyes, close enough to remember the terrible power of his jaws, she stood perfectly still for a long moment. Rex, as if sensing the gravity of the encounter, remained equally motionless. "I used to have bad dreams about you," Maya said conversationally, addressing Rex directly, as if the courtroom full of adults had simply vanished. "Really scary dreams, where you were as big as a house and you had teeth like a monster. But you're not really a monster, are you?" Sofia Rodriguez began crying silently, overwhelmed by her daughter's unexpected composure and wisdom. Carlos felt his anger toward Rex beginning to shift into something more complex, not forgiveness, but a recognition that perhaps the real monsters were the humans who had created this situation. Rex's response was subtle but unmistakable. The powerful dog lowered his head slightly, in what animal behaviorists would later describe as a submissive posture rarely seen in trained police dogs. A soft whine escaped his throat again, and his tail gave a barely perceptible wag, not the confident, assertive tail movement of a working dog, but something more tentative and almost apologetic. "You were scared too that day, weren't you?" Maya continued, her voice taking on the sing-song quality that children use when talking to animals. "When all the sirens were loud and people were running and shouting, you didn't know what to do, so you did what you always do when you're scared and confused." The insight from a 3-year-old was so profound that even hardened legal professionals found themselves wiping their eyes. Maya had just articulated what expert witnesses and psychological evaluations had taken weeks to establish, that Rex's attack was not calculated malice, but the response of an inadequately trained animal placed in an impossible situation by human failures. Dr. Martinez watched in professional amazement as Maya demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence and trauma processing that typically took adult patients years to achieve. The child was not just confronting her attacker, she was humanizing him, finding a path to understanding that could lead to genuine healing rather than lifelong fear. "I forgive you," Maya said simply, looking directly into Rex's eyes. "But you have to promise not to hurt any more little kids, okay? Because we're just trying to play and have fun, and we don't understand scary grown-up things." Rex seemed to understand. He sat down slowly, his powerful frame lowering until he was almost at Maya's eye level. For just a moment, the German shepherd, who had been trained to attack and subdue, looked like nothing more than a confused dog seeking forgiveness from a child who had every right to hate him. The silence in the courtroom was profound and sacred. Even Judge Hawkins, who had seen everything in her 18 years on the bench, felt her professional composure cracking as she witnessed something that transcended legal proceedings and entered the realm of pure human and interspecies understanding. Maya turned back toward the witness box, her mission apparently complete. "Can I go home now?" she asked Judge Hawkins with the practical directness of a 3-year-old who had just accomplished something monumentally important and was ready to return to the normal business of being a child. As court officers prepared to escort Rex from the courtroom, the big dog turned back once toward Maya, as if memorizing the face of the small girl who had shown him more compassion than any human ever had. The look that passed between them would be remembered by everyone present as the moment when justice transformed from punishment into something far more powerful, the possibility of redemption. The moment after Maya's simple question, "Can I go home now?" hung in the courtroom like a prayer waiting for divine response. Judge Patricia Hawkins knew she was witnessing something unprecedented in her 18 years on the bench, but she also recognized that the legal proceedings were far from over. What had just occurred between Maya and Rex transcended law and order, entering territory that courtrooms were never designed to navigate. "Maya," Judge Hawkins said gently, leaning forward from her elevated bench, "before you go home, I need to ask you a few more questions." "Is that okay, sweetheart?" Maya nodded solemnly, climbing back into the witness box with the careful precision of someone who understood the gravity of her role. She picked up Mr. Hoppy from the floor and settled the stuffed rabbit in her lap, stroking his soft ears in the self-soothing gesture that Dr. Martinez had taught her during their therapy sessions. "Maya, you said you forgive the dog that hurt you. Can you tell us why?" Judge Hawkins asked, her voice carrying the gentleness typically reserved for bedtime stories rather than legal testimony. Maya considered the question with the serious contemplation of a philosopher, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "Because," she began, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the silent courtroom, "when I get really scared, sometimes I do mean things too. Like when I bit Tommy Martinez at daycare because he took my favorite crayon. I didn't want to be mean, but I was scared he would break it." The comparison between a 3-year-old's playground conflict and a police dog's attack might have seemed absurd in any other context, but Maya's innocent wisdom cut through legal complexity like a blade through silk. She was explaining trauma response and fear-based aggression with a clarity that expert witnesses had struggled to achieve. "But Maya," Sarah Chun interjected gently, "what happened to you was much worse than someone taking your crayon. This dog hurt you very badly. You had to go to the hospital and have surgery. Doesn't that make you angry?" Maya's response would be quoted in legal journals and psychology textbooks for decades to come. "I was angry for a long time. Dr. Becky helped me understand that being angry is okay, but staying angry forever makes your heart hurt more than your body hurts. And my body already hurts enough." Sofia Rodriguez covered her mouth to stifle a sob, overwhelmed by her daughter's profound understanding of her own healing process. Carlos felt something shifting inside his chest, the rock-hard anger he had carried for months beginning to crack, like ice in spring sunshine. But Maya wasn't finished. She turned toward the defendant's table, where Officer Mitchell sat with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. "You're the policeman who was with the doggy that day, right?" she asked with the direct honesty that only children possess. Mitchell looked up, his face streaked with tears he could no longer contain. "Yes," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry." Maya studied him with the same intense focus she had given Rex, as if trying to solve a puzzle that adults had made too complicated. "You're sad too," she observed. "You didn't want me to get hurt, did you? You were just trying to catch the bad man who was running." "That's right," Mitchell managed to say. "I was trying to protect everyone, but I failed. I failed to protect you." Maya's next words would become the turning point, not just in this trial, but in how America viewed police accountability, institutional failure, and the possibility of healing through understanding rather than punishment. Maybe, Maya said thoughtfully, maybe the problem wasn't you or the doggy. Maybe the problem was that nobody taught you both how to be safe together when scary things happen. Like how Dr. Becky teaches me to count to 10 when I feel scared. So I don't bite people anymore? The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers before Judge Hawkins restored order with a gentle tap of her gavel. Maya had just articulated what legal experts and policy analysts had been struggling to express, that individual blame was less important than systemic training failures that created dangerous situations. Defense attorney Marcus Webb found himself in the unprecedented position of wanting to object to testimony that was actually helping his case, but knowing that interrupting this child's profound insights would be both legally foolish and morally bankrupt. Maya continued, seemingly unaware that she was redefining justice itself. I think the doggy needs better teachers, like how I needed Dr. Becky to help me understand my feelings. And I think you need better teachers too, so you know how to keep kids safe when you're chasing bad guys. Dr. Martinez watched in professional amazement as Maya demonstrated what trauma therapists called post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where survivors develop wisdom and empathy that exceeds their pre-trauma emotional intelligence. Maya wasn't just healing from her attack. She was transforming it into insight that could prevent other children from suffering similar trauma. Judge Hawkins realized she was presiding over a moment that would define her entire judicial career. Maya, what do you think should happen to Officer Mitchell and Rex? Maya's answer came without hesitation. I think they should go to school. Not the kind of school where kids learn to read and write, but the kind where they learn to be better at their jobs. And maybe Rex should have a different job, one where he doesn't have to chase scary people and get confused about who to protect. The wisdom of suggesting rehabilitation over punishment, coming from the mouth of a 3-year-old victim, struck every adult in the courtroom like a lightning bolt of moral clarity. Maya was proposing restorative justice principles that legal scholars spent years studying, delivered with the simple honesty of someone who wanted to prevent other children from being hurt. Officer Mitchell stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor in the silent courtroom. Your Honor, he said, his voice breaking, I want to change my plea. Not to guilty Maya's right, that this was a system failure, not individual malice. But I want to take responsibility for the changes that need to happen. Defense attorney Webb started to object, but Mitchell continued. I've been a police officer for 12 years, and I've never learned proper trauma responses for children in crisis situations. Neither has Rex. We were trained to apprehend suspects, not to protect innocent bystanders caught in dangerous situations. Maya's right. We need better teachers. Maya beamed at Officer Mitchell, as if he were a student who had just grasped a difficult concept. See? You're smart too. You understand now. The profound simplicity of the moment. A traumatized child praising her attacker for accepting responsibility created an atmosphere of such raw emotion that even the court stenographer was wiping tears from her cheeks. But Maya had one more insight that would cement her words in legal history. She turned back to Judge Hawkins and said, You know what, Judge Lady? I think grown-ups make everything too complicated. When kids hurt each other, we say sorry, we learn to do better, and then we can be friends again. Why can't grown-ups do that too? Judge Hawkins felt her professional composure finally crack completely. Here was a 3-year-old child, permanently scarred by institutional negligence, asking why the justice system couldn't operate on the simple principles of acknowledgement, education, and reconciliation that children learned in preschool. Maya, Judge Hawkins said, her voice thick with emotion, you may be the wisest person who has ever appeared in my courtroom. Maya giggled, the first purely joyful sound she had made since the attack. That's silly. I'm just 3 years old. I don't even know how to tie my shoes yet. As laughter rippled through the courtroom for the first time in weeks of testimony, everyone present realized they had witnessed something transcendent. Maya Rodriguez hadn't just identified her attacker or recounted her trauma, she had shown an entire legal system, how justice could heal rather than simply punish, how wisdom could emerge from suffering, and how a child's capacity for forgiveness could transform even the most complex institutional failures into opportunities for genuine reform. When Maya finally climbed down from the witness box and ran to her parents' arms, she left behind a courtroom full of adults who would never again view justice, accountability, or the resilience of the human spirit in quite the same way. Case was far from over, but Maya Rodriguez had already won something far more valuable than any monetary settlement. She had reclaimed her power from those who had failed her and used it to light a path toward healing that others could follow. Judge Patricia Hawkins spent the weekend after Maya's testimony in her home study, surrounded by legal precedents, case law, and constitutional principles that suddenly seemed inadequate for the decision before her. She had presided over thousands of cases, but none had prepared her for crafting a ruling that honored both the profound wisdom of a 3-year-old and the complex demands of legal justice. On her desk sat a drawing that Maya had given her after her testimony, a crayon picture showing a large dog and a small girl standing together under a rainbow with the words "Friends Forever" written in purple marker. When court reconvened Monday morning, the atmosphere was unlike anything the veteran court officers had ever experienced. The usual adversarial tension had been replaced by something approaching reverence. Even the media representatives seemed subdued, as if recognizing they were about to witness history rather than simply report it. Judge Hawkins entered the courtroom, carrying a thick folder of notes and what appeared to be a children's book, The Story of Ruby Bridges, about the 6-year-old girl who integrated New Orleans schools. I have spent considerable time reflecting on the testimony we heard last week, Hawkins began, her voice carrying a gravity that silenced even the slightest whisper. Maya Rodriguez has taught this court something that decades of legal education failed to provide: that true justice must heal as well as hold accountable. The judge's ruling was revolutionary in both its scope and its philosophical foundation. Rather than simply awarding damages or assigning blame, Hawkins crafted a comprehensive mandate that would reshape police protocols nationwide. This court finds that while Rex was the immediate cause of Maya Rodriguez's injuries, the true negligence lies in systemic failures that made this attack inevitable rather than accidental, Hawkins declared. The evidence shows a pattern of institutional negligence spanning 3 years, during which multiple warning signs were ignored in favor of maintaining public image and federal funding. The financial settlement was substantial: $2.3 million to cover Maya's medical expenses, future psychological care, and educational needs. But the non-monetary requirements were even more groundbreaking. Hawkins mandated that the Maplewood Police Department completely restructure its K-9 program under federal oversight, with monthly progress reports submitted directly to her court for the next 5 years. Officer Mitchell will retain his position, Hawkins continued, causing gasps throughout the courtroom, but will serve as the department's first child safety liaison, developing protocols to protect children during police operations. This decision reflects Maya's insight that education serves justice better than punishment when the failure was systemic rather than individual. Mitchell stood as tears streamed down his face, overwhelmed by receiving redemption instead of the career destruction he had expected. His new role would require him to visit schools throughout the district, teaching children about police work, while learning how to recognize and respond to childhood trauma during emergency situations. The ruling regarding Rex was perhaps the most innovative aspect of Hawkins' decision. Rather than ordering the dog's destruction, as the prosecution had initially requested, or returning him to active duty, as the defense had argued, Hawkins mandated a complete behavioral rehabilitation program under the supervision of Dr. James Peterson, the expert witness who had identified Rex's predatory drift condition. Rex will be retrained for community service work, Hawkins announced. He will visit hospitals and nursing homes, providing comfort to patients rather than pursuing suspects. This reassignment acknowledges that Rex's fundamental nature is not malicious, but that his training was inappropriate for his behavioral profile. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of amazement. Even hardened legal observers had never seen. Judge order therapeutic rehabilitation for a police dog based on a child's insight about finding better suited work. But the most remarkable aspect of Hawkins' ruling was yet to come. She established the Maya Rodriguez Protocol, a comprehensive set of guidelines requiring all police departments receiving federal funding to implement child-specific safety measures during emergency operations. The protocol included mandatory trauma-informed training for all officers, specialized equipment for protecting children during pursuits, and psychological evaluations for all K-9 units every 6 months. This protocol will be Maya's lasting gift to children across America, Hawkins stated, looking directly at the Rodriguez family. Her wisdom will protect countless other children from experiencing similar trauma. The immediate implementation of these changes began within days. Dr. Rebecca Martinez was hired as a consultant to develop the trauma-informed training curriculum. Her first session with the Maplewood Police Department drew officers from 3 surrounding counties who volunteered to attend on their own time, inspired by Maya's story. 6 months later, an extraordinary meeting took place at the Children's Hospital, where Maya continued her physical therapy. She had requested to visit Rex during his rehabilitation training, a suggestion that initially horrified her parents, but which Dr. Martinez supported as potentially therapeutic for both child and dog. The meeting was carefully orchestrated in the hospital's garden, a peaceful space with benches surrounded by the sunflowers that Maya and her grandmother had eventually planted together. Rex, now working as a therapy dog, approached Maya with the gentle demeanor of an animal who had learned to offer comfort rather than control. "Hi, Rex," Maya said softly, extending her hand for the dog to sniff. "I heard you're learning to help sick people feel better. That's much better than chasing scary people, isn't it?" Rex's tail wagged gently, not the aggressive alertness of his police work, but the contentment of a dog who had found his true calling. He lay down beside Maya's wheelchair. She still used it for long distances while her arm continued healing, and rested his massive head near her feet. "See?" Maya told the assembled adults, her parents, Dr. Martinez, Dr. Peterson, and Officer Mitchell, who had become an unlikely family friend through his weekly visits. "I told you he just needed better teachers and a better job." The friendship that developed between Maya and Rex became a symbol of healing that drew national attention. Documentarians filmed their interactions for a PBS special about restorative justice. Children's book publishers created illustrated stories about their unlikely bond. Most importantly, their relationship demonstrated that trauma could be transformed into connection rather than perpetual fear. Officer Mitchell's work as child safety liaison flourished beyond anyone's expectations. His monthly school visits became so popular that neighboring districts requested his services. Children who had once feared police officers now saw Mitchell as someone who understood their concerns and prioritized their safety. His presentations always included the story of Maya's courage and wisdom, inspiring other children to speak up when they felt unsafe. The broader impact of the Maya Rodriguez case rippled across the nation. Police departments in 47 states voluntarily adopted versions of the Maya Protocol. K-9 training programs nationwide revised their curricula to include child safety protocols and mandatory psychological evaluations for working dogs. Law enforcement academies began requiring courses in childhood trauma recognition and response. Maya herself continued her recovery with remarkable resilience. Her right arm regained nearly full functionality through intensive physical therapy. More importantly, her psychological healing progressed to the point where she could pet other dogs without fear, a milestone that Dr. Martinez celebrated as evidence of complete trauma resolution. On the first anniversary of the attack, Maya returned to her grandmother's front yard where it all began. The bubble machine whirred cheerfully again, creating the same iridescent spheres that had delighted her before her world changed. But this time, Maya wasn't alone. Rex sat beside her, wearing a therapy dog vest, gently popping bubbles with his nose and making Maya giggle with delight. Carmen Rodriguez watched from her porch rocker, knitting another scarf and marveling at the transformation she had witnessed. The scared, broken child who had left in an ambulance 13 months earlier had returned as a wise, confident little girl who had literally changed the world through her capacity for forgiveness and understanding. "Abuela," Maya called out. "Look, Rex thinks bubbles are funny too. Maybe we were all just scared, and nobody knew how to help us not be scared anymore." As the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn where violence had once shattered innocence, Maya Rodriguez played peacefully with the dog who had attacked her, surrounded by the sunflowers that had grown tall and strong, despite or perhaps because of the storms they had weathered. Their unlikely friendship had grown into something even more beautiful, proof that justice achieved through understanding and healing could transform tragedy into triumph, fear into friendship, and a child's wisdom into a legacy of protection for generations to come.